Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I am your host, the Right Reverend David Clark, and I'd like to welcome you to the Environmental Conference today. Today we are extremely excited for the guest presenters who will be addressing the environmental issues that's facing America and around the world today. We are right in place at the right time to develop strategies, solutions to address this environmental problem that exists today. So I'm going to ask everyone to bring your minds together, bring your heart together, that we can partake of the bread of knowledge coming from experts around the world who are doing great wonders and great things in the community, who have been celebrated by the United Nations organization, and who are now will be celebrated by the Highway and Hedges Outreach Church of God in Christ. So without further ado, I'd like to present to you Lady T. Thompson from T Events Worldwide Network. I'd like for her to come in her own way to share with us.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Pastor Clark. It's always a pleasure to be invited to talk about things that are so near and dear to my heart. I'm best known for agribiz. Agribiz is my passion. Agribiz is my organization that we train farm to profit. We work with women's cooperatives. We have 3 different programs. I've been to a total of 86 countries in total. Right now, our concentration has been on the continent of Africa, but I'll get to that in our program. I'll get to it later in the program. I'm most excited to talk about environmental matters as it relates to agriculture, but I would be remiss if I did not share that as a result of the 63rd session of the United Nations Commission of the Status of Women, we recently had an awards program, the Top 10 Awards program, where we were able to acknowledge, highlight, and collaborate and bring together in the same room change makers of different organizations, NGOs, government agencies, and we have with us the 2019 Warrior Changemaker, Princess Howell, from the Princess Howell Foundation of South Africa. But most importantly, and I hope I make this correct, she is executive member of the National House of Traditional Leaders. Did I get it right? I got it right, yay. So Princess Howell is a change maker. Oftentimes when we're doing infrastructure, new business development, outside of the United States, the engagement has to start with traditional leaders. That's how you get real work done. You talk to, you meet with, you get the buy-in from traditional leaders. So it's an honor and a privilege to have Princess Howell here. So I think without further ado, we'll let her kick it off, and then I'll talk a little bit about agriculture. So, Your Highness.
Bishop Melvin in absentia. I'd like to observe all protocol. I don't necessarily love using the term all protocol of the Second State because I do not have the protocol. I'd like to just acknowledge, and it's the safest way to acknowledge the hierarchy. I'm truly humbled and honored to be here today. I had to extend my stay when this request came. And perhaps I should say I'm doing warm greetings from South Africa. Very warm greetings. When I received the brief about today, I asked the Lord, in fact yesterday to be specific, last night, I said, Lord, it's one of those days that I need you to go before me. And immediately a verse came to my mind, Isaiah 51, verse 10, and it says, fear not, for I am with thee. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you, I will help you, I will uphold you with my righteous hand. And truly that's how and what my life is in a nutshell. The introduction was not made appropriately about what I do and who I present and who I am. But truly at the end of the day, besides all the portfolios that one may have, I'm a child of God. I'm human. Like all of everyone else. And I need to serve. That's what I am. So I may be a princess, but my mission on earth is to serve. And I boldly can stand on top of the mountain to talk about the greatness of the Lord. I've been called die hard. I've been called a cat with 9 lives by medical doctors. I am a survivor of 2 near-fatal complications of pregnancy. Both experiences had me in intensive pain yet. One on a ventilator. In all of that, I have miscarried. A few hours after hearing that I couldn't see my child. On top of that, I have had my child kidnapped by her mind, but through the grace of the Lord, she was found. And I'm blessed to be a mother of 2. So each day, women and children die and become just statistics. We take these things so casually. And having paid my dues at a very young age, all these things happened before the age of 30. But to me, it said the Lord had not finished with me, and I was not fulfilling my purpose on earth. So I had to seek and delve deep inside myself to find myself. And this is my purpose on earth today. So through community development, I try to serve as best as I can. My dedication is to be a selfless servant. And this is why the passion about reproductive, maternal, and child health came into play. Because of my own experiences that opened my eyes to bigger challenges that we face every day. I doubt that we truly understand the importance and the meaning of reproductive, maternal, and child health. And everywhere I go, I say if we do not see to it that we continue to invest in it, then we might as well forget about our future. The efforts we think we are making towards it, because who are we building this future for? That's the question we should be asking ourselves. It is the type of future generations we produce that will determine whether we have a bright or bleak future outlook. And with reproductive, maternal, and child health, that's where it all begins. And so, the programs of my organization, done in partnership with the University of the Free State in South Africa, one of them being a flagship program of the university itself, was launched last year during the year of the centenary of Dr. Nelson Mandela, which the Nelson Mandela Foundation endorsed as one of their official centenary programs and recognized my organization as a partner, is what we call the Let's Kangaroo Africa campaign. Let's Kangaroo Africa, the cradle of humankind. We may know that kangaroos know how to nurture their young. It's natural, effortless, but we cannot do it. So through this campaign, we target 1 million new babies. That is our target mark. And this initiative also falls under the first 1,000 days initiative. I think we know how the UN, UNICEF talk about the 1,000 days. We recognize the fact that kangaroo mother care is used as a method of intervention, has been used over the years to save children, mostly premature babies. And it has done a tremendous job in reducing the child mortality. But now, I say each child must benefit from giving that 10 boost to life. We must ensure that our children thrive from birth. Nourishment through breastfeeding. There is a reason why women produce milk. There's a reason why the Lord made it that way. Why are we bottle feeding and why are we promoting bottle feeding? Emotional contentment at the start of life. Brain development and stimulation. Love and care. These are the key fundamental elements that no amount of money can buy, yet ironically, they're free. But we choose not to instill them in our own. In the world that we live today, we see and live the results of detachment, lack of love, lack of care, lack of nourishment. How do we expect our children to love and care for the next person when they do not know what love and care is? Do we truly expect them to thrive when the environment is not conducive to assist them to do so? And we sitting here today, truly, I would like us to ask ourselves a question. One, how do we see the future of our nation? Because this is a question that I ask myself each day. us sitting here means our time is gone. Our time is almost over. What have we done? How have we done it? Have we done enough? And have we done it with integrity? Will we be able to answer when we are called? I think we truly need to be realistic and genuine about the issues that we are faced with. We may be talking about sustainable development goals, environmental health, and other key focus areas included. But as long as we do not break certain barriers, such as empowerment of our community through knowledge, we will still find it very hard or difficult to progress. We must start at the foundation. Our point of departure should be starting from the root. Let the people who are the beneficiaries of the work that we're trying to do know, understand, own, and lead these agendas. Otherwise, we will continue to lose the battle, including the billions and billions of rands that we spend each year, and we don't see where they're going to. Each penny must count. We here do not make a fraction of the global population, not anywhere near. We are not the reality of the day-to-day struggles of the millions of our people who are disadvantaged and who live beyond the poverty line. Those who hope has reached its threshold because of the circumstances they find themselves in. The struggle is real. People who, when we expect to speak or educate them about issues of the environment or any other issues, their concern is, what am I eating tonight? What are my children eating tonight? This must say to us, we must truly and genuinely rethink our approach. We must invest in mindset and behavioral change. That's where we must start. There's a saying that you can take a horse to a well, but you can't force that horse to drink from the very same well. So we may have wonderful interventions and solutions, but as long as we don't conscientize our people, we must forget. And I'll make an example about my country, South Africa, which had the highest rate of HIV/AIDS infections. And even though we have progressed with the treatment of HIV/AIDS and the accessibility thereof, we now have a new crisis of new infections in the new youth bracket. So that will be from 14 years until about 24, 25 years old. At a very high percentage. This is the future that we're talking about. What does it say to us? How does our future look as a nation? Have we done enough? I asked. I mean, with all the work and investment that has gone in through the years, these are not the results that we envisaged. And I again now ask, how do we see the future of our nation? unemployment, inequality, poverty, the decay of our moral fiber, and the list goes on and on. Not forgetting corruption, which is not helping us much. All these have a ripple effect that is going at a speed that we will not keep up with. And as I'm about to conclude, I'll ask again. This is a question that I want each and every one of us to share with us. We need to do some introspection. We need to do some introspection. So, as a traditional leader and a princess, besides my foundation, my organization that deals with reproductive, maternal, and child health, in my other portfolio as an executive member of the National House of Traditional Leaders, the chairperson of the House and the House tasked me to chair a special task team on what we call the Agrarian Revolution. The President of my country, Mr. Cyril Ramaphosa, as part of his directives, requested the support of traditional leaders to lead South Africa to prosperity. And we as traditional leaders pledged 1 million hectares of land towards this revolution. Understanding that agriculture is a powerful and critical component for sustainability. It is life, good health, which means better livelihoods, including that of the environment. And this goes back to the issue of reproductive, maternal, and child health. And this is how the law works. Because before even conceiving a child, you need to be healthy. How will you be healthy if you cannot even afford to put any form of food on top of the table? And these are the components that we're talking about. It's all a chain that is chained together with the ripple effect that I'm talking about. So agriculture is a tool, I believe, for redressing the ripple effects of inequality and poverty, etc. And I say, let us equip our future generations to ensure that we secure the future of our nations. This is why I'm so passionate about kangaroo care in particular. Because I believe if you nurture anything, not just a child or children, but anything in its infancy, while it's still very young, it is bound to thrive. So kangaroo care applies in all areas. Yes, challenges are there. But I say, in the strides that have been made by those who have gone before us, we need to carry the baton, and we need to leave a legacy. Let us be honest and honorable in how we address these matters. What is important is that we must be unified, we must be focused and determined more than ever. We must also support those who try to be the change. We must also be the change. We're not talking about the change in front of cameras. We're talking about the change that you do when there are no cameras in your little corner. If I could make, if I'm trying to make a difference with my organization, that is not funded, by the way, in any way, what is stopping you to do good in your little corner? The revolution begins in our own household. And with these words, I'd like to leave you with verses from the Bible, which I will not quote because it will be your homework. Matthew 25, verse 35 to 40. I'll repeat. Matthew 25, verse 35 to 40. I thank you.
That was good. It's been an absolute delight to hear a perspective about maternal health and reproductive wellness and how it interacts with the environment. You know, the kangaroo care, I love that. You know, if you can do things that doesn't require any money, not a dollar, not a penny, you know, it starts there. So thank you for being a warrior champion with the kangaroo care. And thank you for bringing that information to the United States. It's been a pleasure. I would like to segue to Agribiz. Agribiz is an agricultural and entrepreneurial and training firm that invests in community development for sustainable development. And I like to say both of those terms. I know it seems like an oxymoron having them both together, but we buy into communities. And we do that because we offer solutions for economic development. And it increases agricultural trade, farm servicing, agro processing and production, urban retailing, marketing, and other food services, just to highlight a few. And oftentimes for SMEs, small-scale producers, or I like to say the bush women, the village women, the market women around the world. But before I go into a little specifics, I want to talk about how the environment matters to agriculture, because it provides the basis for food and agricultural systems. Agriculture has two elements. It has a positive element, which we often hear about, which is the conserving of habitat for wild species, etc., etc. But it also has a more important element. Now I'm a little bad, but I'm gonna get to that. And that element is we need arable land for farming, gardening, community hubs, which is the positive element to agriculture. Not just the negative one, the negative elements such as pollution, soil degradation, impacts on the environment, the climate impacts, etc. But agriculture is extremely important with the environment. The last element to agriculture and environment from the perspective that I represent is environmental degradation and lack of access to environmental assets and undermining of food security and deepening poverty with women and children. That's my mission. And so because of those three elements, I started an organization called Agribiz. And so with Agribiz, we recognize opportunities are rapidly growing for food markets, particularly in Africa. But I'm gonna talk about here in the U.S. first. By 2030, the United Nations has put global campaigns with what are called SDGs, which are Sustainable Development Goals, or they're commonly known as global goals. And in there, it's ways to use prosperity and peace to bring about 17 different goals. So we support that. We support that in our program. And the reason that we've highlighted in Africa right now is because we know that there is an opportunity for $1 trillion of growth just in food security. But I'm going to flip it a little bit and talk about what it means here in the U.S. There are still communities, there are still children and women who are struggling. You know, they're below the poverty line that needs food. And there's so many misconceptions about who provides food to us. So I'm going to talk about some of those things. The first thing is 80% of all food comes from small farmers. I get excited when I see a Kroger's, a Fryer's, a Walmart. You know why? They're committed to making sure that they work with local farmers so that the food that we eat comes from local farmers. And a lot of the local farmers are small-scale farmers. And small-scale farmers or producers are producers who sometimes have 2 hectares or less. And I'm going to segue to commercial farms. Commercial farms are farms that usually have 1,000 acres or more. So by standard, 1,000 acres. But those aren't the people who typically feed us. It's the small-scale producers. When I was growing up, I like to ask this question. Do you know that the average person is 1 to 3 generations from a farming family? And I want to bring it a little clearer when I say farming family. When I was growing up, my grandparents, they always had gardens. So that's farming. My grandparents would plant greens. Now I'm from Michigan, so my grandmother always waited to the first frost before she removed her greens so they could be tenderized by the snow. That's her little that was her trade secret. Cucumbers, tomatoes, peppers, and a litany of other vegetables. But that food substances from that gardening impacted the family. And you knew what you were eating. You weren't eating pesticides and all the other elements that we're not supposed to have from a nutritional standpoint. But beyond that, on my paternal side, my grandfather from Columbia, South Carolina, he came from a 10,000 hectare farm, of which all 10 kids got a share, had 1,000 acres. And right now, they still have 100 acres of land in Columbia. So when I use my own example, when I say we usually are 1 in 3 generations worldwide from a farming family, that's a fact. Rather, it's a family that use gardening or other community elements in terms of participating with gardening. It's farming. Yet, most people don't realize that's the largest employer in the world. It's agriculture. But guess who is most impacted by it? It's women and children. Yet, women play a vital role in food production and food security. Yet they lack continued education and training in agriculture. This is global. This is here local, as well as here domestically, as well as internationally. 55% of all women in agriculture have low levels of education. And without individuals like yourself, without forums such as this, without champions like Princess Habo, there's no way to really close the gap in agricultural education and training. And so my organization, we have been actively, and I do mean actively, participating on the agricultural scene. And that's because our philosophy is pretty simple. Agriculture and agribiz is taught by doing, not sharing. So that we don't go into anybody's community and just talk. We go in hands-on and we get the buy-in of community leaders, whether they're domestically or internationally, and we do it by sharing. Our mission, well, it's pretty significant. Agribiz is a non-governmental international organization And our mission is to lead the future in agribusiness by working with constituent authorities and organizations worldwide. Our vision is pretty cool too. It's salutary. And the reason why it's salutary is because we want to lead other organizations in terms of being the best with entrepreneurship development and training to best serve underserved and non-served people. And I say that because even here in the United States, we still have populations of underserved and non-served communities. Our goal is to think. We want to transform small producers into big business by 2050. But guess what? I've changed that date. As a result of the as a result of the Commission on the Status of Women that the United Nations just had for the 63rd session, we went to the African Mission, and the African Mission has changed that date to 2063. So not only do I want to impact the current generation, but I want to impact my children, my children's children's generation. So I'm extending, transferring small producers by 2063. Guess why? I believe wholeheartedly we are on the brink of a food epidemic. I'm going to say this again. We are on the brink of a food epidemic, and let me tell you why. When I was growing up, as I indicated, my maternal grandparents, they had their gardens every summer. I was blessed not to have to participate in it because I had allergies and I get the fleas and face swell up. But they had their gardens every summer that helped to contribute to food for the home. Well, we no longer have communities, individuals, participating with having farms or gardens. We go for convenience. So by 2050, there'll be 9 billion people on the planet. 9 billion. And 75% of those people will be living in cities due to the urbanization swell. Even here in this community, we're in a city, is it called Beaver or Monaco? Yeah, just the development that's there, everything's new. They're building that right next to the hotel we're staying at, they're building. So with the continuation of the urbanization swell, who's going to feed us? We're going to be permanently out of food. And every time there's an urbanization swell, there's a reduction in the environment from deforesting. Who's going to feed us? There's no more farms. I know where I come from in Michigan. Every time you see a new development going up in the suburbs, there's lots of farms. Who's going to feed us? So this is why it's significant, because everyone, I repeat, everyone has to eat. So, in understanding that entrepreneurship, training, and development impacts the world's largest employer, I want to encourage you today to think about how you too can be more powerful or proactive with agriculture or thinking about agriculture. Not in a big sense. Every time you go to the grocery store and you pick up a piece of produce, think about it. Is this something that I could have grown? There are a lot of technologies, there are a lot of simple ways. You can have container gardens, you can get within your community and figure out how you can have a community hub. But agriculture is extremely important. I'm going to leave you with a couple of different things. The first is the environmental impact of agriculture is the effect of different farming practices which has an impact on the ecosystems around them. So when you go pick up that produce and it says organic, organic is always best. It always has less pesticides. But when you grow your own food, you know what you have in it. Think about the sourcing of where your food comes from. Think about the fish, you know, if it was from the wild or if it was in the farm. I mean, all of these elements impact us and what we eat in our environment. Ultimately, the environmental impact depends on the production practices and systems that's out there. So we try to train and educate women and the youth and how they can play a role, whether they're rural or urban, in making the world a better place by sharing more, planning more, and doing more. And so for that, I say thank you for listening and understanding what agribusiness is about. Are there any questions? Yes.
I have, I'm not sure, because I missed the beginning, but I'm from Washington, D.C., and in some of the suburban Washington, D.C. areas, there are urban farms or urban plots. And is that something that you, I'm not sure what...
I'm glad you brought it. Washington, D.C. is an excellent example. There's 8 wards there. Let me backtrack. I have been around the United States. I've had cooperative agreements with 20 different universities, and I love the Washington, D.C. example of using urban development in communities that are doing well with the 8 wards. There are 8 wards in Washington, D.C., and they have community hubs. Not only do they have the hubs, they have the storage boxes, so after post-harvest, they can store it. They help get the produce that they grow and get it to the farmers market. Washington, D.C. has an excellent example of how even in urban communities, you can still create hubs to have your own food and have a little bit of economic impact, not just to the community where the food is grown, but to the community at large. And so thank you for bringing that up. I love that example. Another example is also in Jackson, Mississippi. Jackson, Mississippi with I want to make sure I say it correctly, not Ole Miss, but Mississippi State, Alcorn University, and Jackson State. They participate with the Black Farmers Association and with all of the farmers markets. So they too have a similar systems there that is working in that state. Another question?
Yes, I was just gonna say, I guess, it's always good to get produce, I guess, from farmers market if you can't find organic in a grocery store, or if you can't grow your own food. But I was just thinking about the market of agriculture in the supporting, basically, I guess, farmer markets. Does that kind of help that mission, those small farmers who are able to bring their produce to market, not through, I guess, a larger carrier like Giant Eagle or something of that matter? Because I guess they're serving their community, so it's one way to help. Besides, it is one way to help, I guess, supporting. Farmers markets.
Yes. So supporting farmers markets is an excellent example of showing how you can participate in community development and economic development, because oftentimes you have a lot of farmers that's struggling or they're trying to go to market. So you might have a micro or 2 hectares or less, a small farm that's trying to scale up. So in helping them with the farmers market, sometimes that helps accelerate their trajectory in terms of scaling up, particularly when they have niche specific products. I'll use an example like honey, and right now we're on the brink of a honeybee epidemic because some of the species they're just crazy right now. So anytime you can go to a local farmer's market and buy honey that's produced locally, that's great, because you're playing a part in the ecosystem and bringing some economic development, because you have a lot of these small producers who are at the farmer markets that they're not big enough to go to like a Kroger or a Walmart, so they need the consumer loyalty and buy-in at the market. So thank you for that. Yes?
I'm sorry, I have another issue, another question. And one of my big concerns personally is with mega agriculture and production on a mega scale and the way that impacts the environment as opposed to the small farmer. Does your organization and I guess the word is lobby against that kind of mega farms or mega business?
So let me say, officially, I know that you're this, that I am not anti-commercial farming. However, my strategy is being niche specific with the small producers because of the degradation in soil, because most of the large farmers, they use GMOs.
Yeah.
So everything that we do in all our programs, we use non-GMOs. We talk about traditional farming that goes back to the rotation of crops and land and microorganisms and making sure that everything is legitimately organic without using the pesticides and paying to, it costs a lot of money to get deemed an organic farm. We just recently had the opportunity to go to see Dr. Rhoda Alali's BioSmart Solar, the first one of its kind, the first BioSmart Solar nanotechnology farm. And the most interesting element.
Where is that?
There, it's in Ohio. It's in Ohio.
Dayton.
It's outside of Dayton, but she'll be here. I think that there's representation here. But the most interesting thing there was the soil. The farming family has mastered getting back to soil because soil is the most important element to having a nutritious crop as well as making sure that what we put in our systems are there. So do I lobby? Unofficially, I lobby. But officially, no, I do not. We support all farms, but I'm very niche specific in terms of who our audience is and who our consumers are and or who are the individuals who we help support.
Now, I also have a question about Africa. In terms of continuing to clear effects like natural habitats and continuing to clear habitats for farming. I mean, is that part of your view or?
So you want me to respond?
I'm sorry, maybe I missed something right before.
Okay,
I can't.
so I'm going to respond to that. I'd like for you to respond. I work with a lot of different African countries, governments, and NGOs. And it just depends on the nature of the terrain of the culture. Because oftentimes in the U.S., people aren't as educated in understanding the dynamics of what might happen in West Africa are not necessarily applicable to what happens in East Africa, South Africa, Northern Africa. Most Americans don't even know that the continent is comprised of 54 countries to start with. So the conditions aren't the same. So when we do our programming, I would not take someone from South Africa, which has a variety of weather conditions that some are similar to the U.S. I wouldn't take them to like Arizona thinking that the systems are going to be the same with the soil, with the meat production, because the temperament of animals are different, but the conditions are the same to going to like Illinois, Indiana, and Michigan, because we have a variety of agricultural commodities as well as our land conditions have some similarity. But to your question, going back to Africa as a whole, you have to be a little bit more specific with the conditions. And so we work to tailor our programming, whether it's in the U.S., domestically, or internationally, to make sure the conditions meet the output for more sustainable development. But I would like to have Princess, in terms of her experience, to address that question as well.
Thank you very much. I think basically, and I'm sorry, I'm just like someone I wasn't photos not too well, but I think she has encompassed what the question you responded very well. It depends truly on each country.
Of course.
and the conditions that each country faces. So when you talk about Africa, you talk about diversity. Because the question was about Africa.
Yeah, so I'm sorry, I didn't mean to make it sound, because you're absolutely right. So I understand, okay.
Any other questions, comments, or concerns? Well, I would like to say this. Truly, the best way to predict the future is to create it. And it takes individuals such as yourself to stand up, to share, to think about, and to be actively engaged with creating your future. Not just for yourself, but for your children, your children's children. And if you don't have children, your family's children, your family's children's children, and just to be inclusive. I know that there's a Native American proverb that says, and I'm paraphrasing, that this world is not ours, and we're borrowing it from our children. I truly believe that's it. And we thank you for your listening here today.
In terms of climate change, has there been any new legislation that would impact your organization and your mission?
Well, climate change is extremely important. Because I work internationally, I stay under the radar in terms of getting actively engaged into legislative arenas with that, because I would not want to put a red bullseye on our organization that would prohibit us from working with often the most underserved populations, because the conditions of lobbying here are not necessarily the same with other countries. So I stay out of that arena. I stay on my yoga mat. I try to be cool, calm, and collected on my yoga mat and stay laser focused with servicing, small scale producers. So as it relates to climate change, it's real. I don't think that, how do I say, the current administration in this country has not taken it as serious as I wish that we could have. But it's a real situation. And it does impact the environment. It does impact agriculture. I have no problem saying that.
And as a layperson, the administration is full of climate change deniers, and what everybody in this room has to do is vote. And so that we can have some real science and some reality who's making the legislation that's going to impact our children.
Absolutely.
But what I try to encourage people when they talk about legislative issues is the first thing that you can do in the U.S. is you can contact your local representatives. If you go to the House website, the Senator website, they all have what are called these default comment sections. They read them. They get documented. So don't call them. You go put in, you go fill out, put your name, your address, and say what your issue is, regardless to what side of the aisle they sit on, and tell them your position on it. You have to be actively engaged. And what happens is, after they get so many inquiries, it becomes an issue for them. And they will contact you, and you'll get an audience with them. So that's the unofficial way if you really want to be engaged as a lay person in terms of, lobbying or having a seat at the table. I've learned in agriculture, I no longer ask for a seat at a table, I occupy the seat. I show up, I get engaged, and I encourage other people to do the same. Whatever your issues are, whether it's climate change, whether it's social justice, inequality, whatever the issue is, occupy that space.
So I just had a question about how long do you think the current environment is sustainable as far as, like, you're talking about a food shortage, and like when you bring that up to people, it sounds very scary and Armageddon-like, but it's like we're in this unfortunate stage of preparation for that to possibly happen. So I guess I'm just wondering, as we're preparing, where do we start looking that like the stop clock is starting to run out? When people have already said that because we have ignored the signs of climate change, we have about maybe 12 years to do something. And that's when we lose control. So I guess I'm just asking you, as far as agricultural standpoint, when do you think like the sun's gonna get hotter, the rain's gonna dry up, those types of conditions of almost like a Mad Max scenario could possibly really happen, and how do you kind of prepare for that?
So to answer the question.
I had a lot of questions.
Of how to encompass it all together, it starts with you in terms of your preparation. So everybody has the opportunity to participate in this. And so my mission, my platform is participating in it now. As I shared, I originally had 2050 as the ideal thing. And I have had several people from the USDA to say, you know what, T, it is a food epidemic, but they won't say it. Unofficially, they've told me this. And people don't want the panic, the scare of it. So how do you equip yourself in the now? You start educating yourself, you start getting your seeds, like, okay, what is it that I can grow at home? Whether you start with a counter, herbal garden, or a container garden, or you go next door, if you don't have land that you can have a garden, you start figuring out what those techniques are, what works in your conditions with your soil, because all soil is not the same. You have to actively participate. That's why I say we plan more, we share more, and we do more. So to offset, you know, the Armageddon scenario is you plan more, you do more, and you share more. The more that you educate others, the more that you bring your family involved in it, it helps to offset the epidemic, because what happens when there's no more food? That's just something that we have to take away from platforms like this. And so I commend Pastor Clark, Reverend Clark, for even having this kind of forum, because oftentimes people don't want to dialogue about this. They don't want to generate conversations about it. And as I said, off the record, I've had people from agencies that say, yeah, you know, we're on an epidemic. So when there's a travesty with any type of crop, you know, the crops don't get replaced. You know, it's a system, it's an ecosystem. So you have to pay attention, because a lot of the climate change is impacting agriculture. So being able to participate and have your own methodologies that works for you and your family, that, you know, the conditions, whether you eat meat, don't eat meat, et cetera, is important.
How do you get educated as far as knowing what soil produces what kind of vegetable or the best, or things like that?
Okay.
Like if you wanted to get started with something like that.
So what I always recommend to people to go to your local nursery. And the reason why I say go to your local nurseries, the local nurseries and also Home Depot and Lowe's. This time of the year, they have free classes, and they even have some. You can start off by going to the kids' classes. Oftentimes, they're free, and enough people don't go, so they'll let the adults participate too. They have classes on, build your own container. I started at that level because they have experts from your area, the demographics that have more familiarity with what soil conditions you have. They have more familiarity with, you know, the sun conditions and what would grow best in this region versus this region, if you have a flatland or more mountainous area. So I strongly recommend going to your local nurseries and or looking at a Lowe's or Home Depot and seeing how that they can help you in your educational process to do more, share more, and plan more.
I have a question. Not really a question, but a statement. What I'm taking away from this is that we have a food epidemic now. So I think that that's something that needs to be spread around, because until I sat here, and we do, I mean, I realize it now, but until I sat here and heard you speak, I didn't think that there was actually an issue with food. But now that I see it, I think that that's something that needs to be screened from the hilltops. And you know that I mean, based on what you're telling me, this is pretty serious. Shouldn't be taken lightly. So what can we do more to emphasize this to the public?
Well, awareness is the best key to change. So you can deploy your change management systems. Like, I don't know if you are, whether it's a transfer of power to power, meaning that you know other powerful people that's on this platform, whether it's a transfer of you being an influencer, talking to another influencer, whether it's a transfer of you talking to another change maker who can get them engaged. Engagement happens at all levels, whether it's the grassroots level, whether it's with your family, whether it's with your church. It's so many different ways. You have to take the responsibility, now that you're aware of what you're going to do with it. And so organizations like myself, I like to educate people about what's happening, but the responsibility of what's next lies with you. What do you do with it next? So that's my response to it. I'm often asked that. I think that's one of the best questions anytime I have a chance to speak on this platform.
To echo what you're saying, excuse me, to echo what you're saying, I think it's important too, especially in larger communities where there's different groups that you can connect with, and as you're learning and as you're developing, try to get into like Rotary Club lunches and stuff like that, where you become the expert. You go in and you educate others, talking 10 or 15 minutes, sometimes just on basic issues. But if we don't do this, if we don't understand what the issue is and how each one of us can impact it, it's going to get beyond us. And as you said, we don't have a lot of time. We don't have a lot of time.
Yeah, again, what I take away from this is that we're already there. This is already a serious problem. That's what I
just wanted to add to that, because I'm like, what do you kind of start people out with? But there's no like government agency to say like, here, read the introduction to this about how the environment is, being degraded, is breaking down. So what I'm hearing from you is like, yeah, I have all the knowledge and I can tell you, but now you know, so tell everybody else. Tell your churches, tell your, your sewing circle, tell your book club. I just feel like there's like a lack of need of people being able to get that message out. So like it's something that I'm going to do tomorrow which is my Monday at work. I'm going to step into our staff meeting and kind of say, hey, let me just take a few minutes, and I've written down some bullet points, because I feel like that's like, oh yeah, so I heard about somebody talking about a garden at work today. And that's going to be the next person's little ticket to say, actually, yeah, so what did you think about a garden? So I guess it's just one of those things that like, it starts in the small, like you said, in your small little corner, but it is kind of devastating to think about, because it really does start that way. And I'm just hearing kind of, you're almost like the small government agency speaking out on these things that like people don't have a resource or something to just go to and get the information. I was like, what's a starter box for people to start their own gardens? You just kind of got to start talking about it. So anyway.
So just to respond to that, I'll give you 3 things. The first is, when you're on a plane and they say, okay, when the oxygen mask comes down, you put it on yourself first, you tighten it up before you go do it to someone else. My platform is like that. You first have to start with yourself, and you have to control your area of your contact network. I believe that your contact network is your net worth. So you have to look at how within your network you can have your network with generating a conversation. The second thing is, it's almost like, I forgot who started the cable news station. When he was told, like, who's going to want to listen to cable news stations 24 hours? And it's generating a conversation. And the person who started the 24 cable news was generating conversations. So news is what? Generating conversations. So when you take the responsibility and the ownership of, I'm going to generate conversations, that's the first start with your awareness. So thank you for asking, because oftentimes in the workplace, I've had examples here domestically as well as internationally of people starting in the workplace container gardens. And that's the first, because you can grow it. All you need is a little light, turn the light on, have some containers, and then everybody take a little. That's a simple way to do it. And lastly, I want to say, I am T. Thompson from Detroit, Michigan. I'm a byproduct of the Detroit public school systems. And so if I'm a simple girl from Detroit that can take this platform internationally and domestically, what can you do? I don't come from large advanced systems. I'm an average girl from an urban area that I'm taking this platform and I'm using it. And so if I can do it with no support, I'm not a large entity or agency, I don't have, you know, mega thousands and behind me, but what I do have is I have a voice, I have tenacity, and I have the ability to connect with people. That's my God-given talent and gifting. And so you can use yours to have that same opportunity to generate conversations, because it starts with us. That's why I say, truly, the best way to predict the future is to create it, and you have to participate in creating it.
We certainly appreciate the content, the information that you have shared with us, and also arranging for Her Highness Princess Baba to be here and participate and share her story, her vision, her mission. It certainly has inspired many questions and inspired us today. And hopefully this evening we show you how much we appreciate what you're doing, and we plan to honor you for your contribution that you're making to Africa and also around the world. Let's give her another hand.